Good morning, everyone. Welcome to JFrog Artifactory Enterprise webinar. I am Raghav Baldania, and as you all know, the agenda for this Artifactory webinar is to discuss the enterprise aspect of installing Artifactory. So we'll take a look at the agenda in a moment. We do have quite an audience today, so first of all, would like to welcome everyone and get started from here. So introducing myself, as I mentioned, I am Raghav Baldania, part of solutions engineering team at JFrog. We primarily deal with customers, work with customers and partners in terms of integrations, in terms of solutions development, and any aspect of proof of concept delivery and the customer success management after the PO is signed. So basically, we are the point of contact for anything technical you want from JFrog. The agenda for today would be, we'll take a quick review at what Artifactory is, how it sits into your CI/CD pipeline, how it benefits, how your CI/CD pipeline would benefit from Artifactory, and what is the purpose of installing Artifactory into your CI/CD pipeline. We will take a look at the challenges that I get a lot of time from customers and prospects in terms of how do I scale Artifactory, and then the question is, would Artifactory scale for any of their scaling? Is it a vertical scaling, horizontal scaling, adding more data centers, adding more users, and so on, right? So I'll address those challenges today. Other challenges I get are in terms of locality. We already have a distributed team of developers working from 4 different sites, for example. How do I make sure that my binaries are available to all those developers in real time, and it's not facing any latency issues, or is not having any other override issues? So this is something that we will address today as well. The other topic that I'm going to discuss today is high availability. This is one of the key aspects of an enterprise deployment, where you want your production ready applications to be highly available. Any disaster that happens on the system or that happens across the platform, you still want to make sure that your infrastructure is fully fault tolerant and it's redundant to any of those disasters or debacles, right? And the last but not the least is the storage limitations. We do have Artifactory utilized as the binary repository manager, right? So you want to make sure that as you are adding more and more binaries, you are not facing any limitations in terms of storage. So we'll discuss about how to mitigate these issues, what are the options that Artifactory provides you in terms of eliminating any limitations on the storage. Okay. And we will also discuss one topic about security, where we will see how Artifactory addresses the security aspect of having user managed across multiple instances. And we will take a look at how access tokens, for example, will help you in terms of managing those users across multiple clusters and multiple instances. By the way, most of these topics are relevant to Artifactory 5.0 release that just went GA a couple of weeks ago. So if you have been using Artifactory for a while now, you will see some changes into my presentation today, into my demo today, about how it looks different from what you have been using so far. If you haven't used Artifactory 5.0 so far, you will see a lot of changes today. And having said that, if you have any questions, feel free to send those questions to me via Q&A tab. I'll be putting everyone on mute so for audio quality purposes. So yeah, feel free to shoot any questions you have on the Q&A tab, and I'll tackle those questions at the end of the webinar. I'll have 5 to 10 minutes spare for Q&A, so we can answer those questions. And if we don't have much time to answer those questions, you can send us an email with any questions you may have, and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions offline. Okay, so having said that, let's get started with the overview of Artifactory, and then we'll take a look at those challenges and few demos today. So as you all know, Artifactory is a universal binary repository manager, right? Now you can see a lot of icons and a lot of logos on the screen here. This is not all. These are just part of the subset of what Artifactory integrates with and what Artifactory supports. We do much more than this. So as we can see, the Artifactory does support both pieces or both sides of R&D development. It supports all the dev applications. So you have your CI servers, you have your package managers, you have your source code management servers here as well, and it also supports the operation side of it. So it supports all the package types, all the deployment types, all the package managers like Ruby, or you have NPM, Yum, Maven, Docker, for example, NuGet, Git LFS, and so on, right? The list is endless. Artifactory is, in short, universal to all these package types and package managers. So I was mentioning how Artifactory sits into your CI/CD pipeline, right? So this workflow will show you how it integrates with the entire end-to-end flow of your CI/CD development, and we'll go here from step to step. So the first thing is any SDLC takes care or starts with your developers writing code, right? So you have your dev team here writing the code, and as part of their software development process, they will declare dependencies. Now, these dependencies could be external or internal. And when I say external or internal, it could be coming from your local repositories, or it could be coming from remote repositories like Maven Central or any other central repository servers. Having said that, those repositories should come from Artifactory. So resolution is done through Artifactory, and Artifactory will take care of resolving those dependencies from local repositories or remote repositories. So Artifactory would know if it doesn't have those those packages, it will go out to those external repositories and fetch those packages for you. And while it is fetching those packages, Artifactory is also going to cache those packages, right? So when the next request comes in for the same package, Artifactory can now deliver that package from the local copy and doesn't have to go out to fetch that package. So this is the beauty of having everything cached within your remote repositories in Artifactory. Okay, so now you have desktop build. Your desktop build is done because you got your dependencies resolved. You are good to go. You think you're confident enough to submit your code. So you commit your code to VCS, and your VCS in turn will trigger a build onto your CI server, right? Now it could be Jenkins, Hudson, TeamCity, Bamboo, Travis, TFS, Circle CI, all those things, as you see on the CI server tab here, they can talk to Artifactory, and Artifactory will in turn resolve their dependencies for them. Now, because this is the build coming from the same developer, it is most likely to have the same dependencies that we had earlier in the desktop build or local build were. So all those dependencies are coming from Artifactory locally now, because Artifactory did cache everything that had to be coming from outside world. So at this point, everything is coming from local copy. So this way, your build time reduces drastically. You don't have any network latency. You don't have any lag in terms of bringing those artifacts from outside, right? Your artifacts could be as large as 1 gig or more, or it could be smaller artifacts, but Artifactory would be able to supply everything locally. So it doesn't matter what the size of your artifact is, the supply time itself goes down drastically. Okay, so now the dependencies are resolved through Artifactory. What next? Because your binaries reside onto Artifactory, we also want you to deploy your builds onto Artifactory. So that way, Artifactory is your one-stop shop for anything binary. Your builds, your applications, your binaries, your packages, your dependencies, your libraries, plugins, everything resides onto JFrog Artifactory. Anything but source code resides onto Artifactory. So you deploy your build to Artifactory. As part of this build deployment, Artifactory will bring along all the dependencies, right? It will bring all the environment variables. It will bring all the information that you have for your build to Artifactory. So that way you have your source of truth for everything about your build. What variables were used, what dependencies were used, what binaries were used as part of your build, what is the timestamp, and so on. The entire process is logged. So that way you can find out what went into the build, what came out of the build, what was set into your build nodes and build machines, and blah, blah, blah. So you have everything inside Artifactory for any information that you are seeking for your build. This way, you also make sure that all your builds are reproducible builds. Because every information is stored into Artifactory, any build that you want to reproduce after a couple of years, after a couple of months, you have each and every information that you want to reproduce that build. So Artifactory also gives you flexibility of generating reproducible builds. Now, after that build is done, your QA comes in for testing, right? Now, your QA can also pick up those binaries from Artifactory. As you see, this is the one-stop shop for all your builds and all your binaries, right? So QA comes in, pick up the build, does the testing, and then QA can contribute the metadata back to the Artifactory so that, hey, this build passed so-and-so test, these are the test results, these are the properties set, these are the metadata for this particular build, right? So all those metadata for all your binaries can be dumped inside Artifactory. And after that is done, after you're ready to promote your build, if you are confident enough that a QA is giving a green light to your build, you can promote that build to production, right? Now, that promotion, that deployment can also happen through Artifactory. Your deployment tools, your orchestration tools like Chef or Puppet or Ansible or Docker or anything can talk to Artifactory, grab those binaries that they are looking for and start deployment. But at the same time, if you are someone who is publishing your binaries to external world, if you are a software supplier, for example, you want to expose your binaries to or distribute your binaries to external world, you can do that through Bintray. So Artifactory talks directly to Bintray, and Bintray is our distribution platform for distributing those binaries to the world. Bintray sits on the CDN, behind the CDN or Akamai network. So it's really fast and really, really easy to supply your dependencies and supply your binaries to everyone across the globe, right? So this is how Artifactory sits into your CI/CD pipeline. And then we have products called Mission Control and X-Ray. I can talk about that, but that's not the scope of this webinar, so I'll skip that. But you can take a look at how X-Ray and Mission Control also aids Artifactory in terms of helping Artifactory support this end-to-end model of your CI/CD workflow. So as you can see, Artifactory started right from your developer writing code all the way to your binary went into production. So this sits right in the center of the CI/CD pipeline, and that way it makes sure that it acts as your deployment target, your dependency manager, and your source of truth for any binaries and builds. Since we are talking about binaries, we all know that binary explosion has been gone up for last couple of years or last decade, right? Early 2000s, people used to do build once a week or once a month or nightly builds. If they are really, really forward company, they used to do nightly builds. But from there onwards, the trend of CI came in, then the trend of CD came in, then people started moving toward DevOps, where now you are generating binaries for entire organization rather than just one particular team. You are generating builds for everyone, and then the explosion of binary came in, right? And then you started containerizing all those applications, and now you are generating even bigger binaries. And then you started breaking those monolithic builds into microservices. So now you are generating 10 folds, 16 folds, 20 folds of your builds, right? So my point is, you are generating so many binaries, you are exploding your environment with such and such binaries. What do you do with those things? Where do you store them? How do you make sure that you are leveraging the right set of information coming out of these binaries, right? This data is huge. We want some way to leverage this data, to mine this data, to make sure we can find trends and we can predict things out of this data that we have. So what Artifactory does is Artifactory helps you in terms of managing that binary explosion, manage those properties, manage those metadata coming out of those binaries. So as I mentioned that earlier, where Artifactory would be able to get your build information from your Jenkins or CI server, right? So Artifactory actually tracks everything that is coming out of your environment. Doesn't matter if it's Jenkins environment or anything. Artifactory can track any set of property, any set of metadata that is coming out of your binaries. So tracing your binaries is really easy now. Artifactory would be able to help you in terms of mining this pile of metadata and bring out the exact amount of information that you're looking for. So the consumption of metadata is done through AQL. Artifactory has a proprietary query language called Artifactory Query Language. Artifactory would be able to query this information, this pile of information and this ocean of metadata, and give you the exact amount of information that you're looking for. Doesn't matter you have 100 million artifacts in your Artifactory or you have 100 artifacts in your Artifactory, right? AQL can leverage the architecture that is being set for working through Artifactory metadata. It will be able to fetch any set of information, doesn't matter how complex your query is, in terms of providing you with the result that you're looking for. Now, the metadata that we are talking about is not only your build metadata, it's your QA metadata, it's your deployment metadata, it's your platform architecture, your development lifecycle, your dependencies, your versions, everything is calculated or everything is stored in terms of metadata. So as you can see here, it's really, really huge amount of information that is stored inside Artifactory. Now, the only question is how do you leverage that information, right? So that is where AQL comes in the picture in terms of getting that information out of Artifactory. And since we are talking about these large amount of information inside Artifactory, we all know that quality has its own quantity, or quantity has its own quality, right? But the question that I raised earlier, that how Artifactory would scale, how Artifactory supports a bigger organization. Now, just the example is right in front of you. The customer that basically this number is coming right after customer's environment. I won't be able to name the customer, but and this numbers are kind of dated. Like this number is about last year, where they had 60 terabytes of artifacts. And doing about 52 million artifacts per day, right? Transaction per day. So you can imagine this is huge. And in today's date, I think they are almost touching 100 terabytes of data. These numbers are from last year, but my point is we have several customers, not just one. We have several customers who are doing hundreds of terabytes of data transactions per day with Artifactory. Millions of artifacts are being exchanged or being transactions through the Artifactory application a day, and Artifactory is working just fine. And it also depends on how your architecture is laid out, how your systems are allocated, how your resources are allocated. But the end goal is Artifactory will support your scaling. Doesn't matter if it's a horizontal scaling or it's a vertical scaling. Artifactory does support that. And to back that data, we do have some statistics around there where we have some few of the largest telecom providers are using Artifactory. We have a huge presence in the financial services industry. A lot of banks, financial institutions are trusting Artifactory for making sure that binaries are safe and binaries are accessible across the globe. And same thing goes with software companies. 8 out of 10 largest Fortune 500 software industries are leveraging Artifactory. So we do have the numbers, we do have the data, we do have support from big customers and small customers. We are not targeting just big players here. Artifactory does support, as I mentioned, it supports really small deployment to a really strong or really robust large enterprise deployment. Now, coming to challenges, as you scale Artifactory to bigger deployments, larger organizations, you want to make sure that those challenges are tackled as well, right? So these challenges are distributed team, for example. You have your teams distributed globally, and you want to make sure your artifacts exchange is going smooth. You are not overwriting or stepping on anyone's toe, and you're making sure that artifacts are still available in the same version that you're looking for, and there is no lag or there is no latency in terms of your artifacts. Second challenge is high availability pipelines. I think I talked about this earlier, where you want to make sure your artifacts or your production instances are highly available so that any disaster that's happening on your system is not affecting your overall architecture, overall system performance for your build infrastructure or just fetching artifacts from Artifactory. Scaling your storage, making sure that your storage is also scaling along with Artifactory. You don't have bottleneck at the storage level so that you cannot scale through Artifactory. Security, you want to make sure that your users are be able to access Artifactory. Doesn't matter it's one instance, 2 instances, or among different clusters of instances. You want to make sure that your users have appropriate access. At the same time, you also want to make sure that you are not giving out something that is you don't want to give out, right? So you want to make sure that your accessing or your control to Artifactory access is really limited. So that way you are not giving out full access to users, but giving only access that they require. So for example, your cleanup scripts, your build users, your end users, you want to make sure that they have appropriate access to multiple Artifactory instances or just one instance. And then at the end is you want to make sure that you are checking your health of your Artifactory instances from time to time. So if you have for example, 5 instances deployed throughout the world or 10 instances deployed across the globe. You want to make sure that you are monitoring right set of information so that you can predict when the system would go down or what is going on with the system overall, right? So managing and monitoring your instances is also critical. So we are going to talk about all these challenges one by one, and we'll see how Artifactory tackles these challenges. Distributed teams, right? So as I mentioned earlier, you have your teams across the globe. How do you make sure that you are not facing any network latency, or your artifacts are being distributed to your teams in a timely manner where they don't see any lag, but at the same time they are also getting delivered the right set of artifacts that they are looking for, right? The easier solution is you can have Artifactory servers locally onto this networks, right? But that's not going to solve your problem. Why? Because it is going to be a lazy proxy, right? So it is going to be an on-demand proxy. So what's the point of having a local repository if you're not having artifacts locally? Second, you can have latency in terms of versions. For example, your master data center is having version 2.0, but the remote Artifactory is still running on version 1.9. And the reason is it's running on 1.9 is because you didn't fetch 2.0 yet. So then this way you're not solving the problem that you initially had, right? So this is the simplest solution, but it doesn't work really well. There are a couple drawbacks. Of course, it has a benefit, but there are a couple drawbacks. On the other hand, the ideal solution is to choose the right set of replication between push and pull replication. As you all are aware, Artifactory will support pull and push replication. It also supports a star topology, so that is one-to-many or many-to-one topology, or a many-to-many replication topology. So on here, we are looking at push replication, right? Where you want to make sure that you are pushing the latest information to all your remote sites so that there is no lag in terms of versions, there is no network lag or network latency, and you are getting the right set of information that you're looking for. So it solves all our problems. And the benefits are it's an eager proxy, so that any new version that is updated onto your master would be pushed onto your remote proxies as well. But keep in mind, it's not going to overwrite the older versions. So for example, you have version 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 on all your Artifactory instances, and then on your master, the new version comes in called 1.5. The Artifactory is going to push 1.5 to all your instances, but at the same time, it's also going to preserve the older instances, older versions as well. So you have your full set of information. You have your oldest version, that's 1.2, and you have your latest version as well. So you see the point here. You can have all the versions preserved so that everything is being there in your Artifactory instances, and you have the flexibility to choose what version you want to use, the latest or the oldest version, right? And this push replication is event-based push, right? So that way you are not doing anything manually. Of course, you have a cron setup for pushing this replication out, but at the same time, event-based push sits on top of your cron-based replication. So that way, any new event that occurs onto your Artifactory instance, be it a new artifact available inside Artifactory, or you are changing a metadata or a property, everything that you are changing onto your master would be pushed to your latest or all the Artifactory instances. So that way, it's an event-based push. You don't have to wait until the cron job kicks in. This is the example of how a full mesh topology would work, right? You have your multiple data centers across the globe. So let's take an example that I have on the screen. I have sites A, B, C, and D. And then I want to have full mesh topology across all these 4 sites, right? Now, Artifactory uses the formula of n squared. You have n number of sites, then you have n squared number of repositories. In our case, we have 4 sites, you have 16 repositories. Every local Artifactory, so for example, we'll take a look at the first Artifactory instance, Amsterdam. Amsterdam will have 4 repositories, 1 local and 3 remote repositories, right? So for example, it has Amsterdam local repository, and then it has local repositories called B, C, and D, pointing to Bangkok, Chicago, and Denver. Not Chicago, Cape Town in our example. So basically, you have 4 repositories on each of these sites, as you see in the diagram, right? In the first site, I have BCD. Second site, I have ACD. Third site, I have ABD. And the fourth, I have A, B, and C, right? Now, you might have a question where your developer would need to configure these 16 repositories in your client environment to work with Artifactory, right? The answer is no. You will, what you will do as an admin is you will cover all these 4 repositories into one virtual repository. So your developer only have to configure the client for virtual repository, and Artifactory will resolve artifacts behind the scene for all these repositories. So this is the beauty of having Artifactory virtual repositories, where your admin can change, remove, add repositories behind the scene without having to affect the client environment. So let's get back to the diagram here. You have 4 repositories on each of these sites. Now, how the replication works is site A, Amsterdam, is going to push repository A to all other A's. So A on Bangkok, A on Cape Town, A on Denver. Artifactory Amsterdam is going to push on all those 3 A repositories. Similarly, Bangkok is going to push to B repositories. Cape Town is going to push to C repositories, and Denver is going to push to D repositories. So this way you have your 4 different sites talking to each other, gathering information from each other without overwriting any existing information. So this way you can see that how full mesh topology would work really well with Artifactory. And we do have a lot of customers deploying full mesh topology with not just 4, but 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 repositories or 10 Artifactory instances across the globe, and it's working really well for them. Next challenge is reliable pipelines. How do you make sure that your pipeline is reliable? How do you trust your pipelines? So basically, the question is, what do you do to make your pipeline reliable, right? Now, I want to make sure that every instance or every example that we are talking about here is not just a client. For example, a telecom industry is not a longer a telecom industry. It's a software company. Finance institution is not finance institution anymore. I mean, it's still a software company. Retailers, they are still a software company. For example, Macy's or Nordstrom, they have their giant software teams sitting behind the servers to make sure that everything is up and running. All the banks, they do have big teams of software developers and making sure that their application is up and running all the time. So as you can see the trend, any company is a software company today, right? Some part of their business touches the software, and without that software piece, their application or their business is not going to be fully leveraging the potential of their business, right? So now, since you are a software company, you want to make sure that you are releasing your application or updating or patching application really fast. In today's age, we want to make sure that you are releasing updates really, really quickly to stay ahead of the competition, right? So this way, you want to make sure that you want to trust your pipeline in order to release fast. Now, the example I can give you is the Docker, for example, where people are moving towards containerization today. People are moving towards Docker today. But any company who is using Docker is not using Docker by themselves, right? Docker is just an abstraction layer that sits on top of it. There has to be some content within that Docker image or Docker container. So any company that is using Docker is not going to be using Docker by itself. You need something more to support that. So that is where Artifactory comes in. Artifactory, as I mentioned earlier, it's a universal binary repository manager. It will support Docker, but it also support everything else that Docker uses. So the example of Docker I wanted to give is because Docker is really popular example. Everyone uses Docker. Well, not everyone, but everyone is aware of Docker. And Artifactory is a trusted Docker registry. It acts as your trusted Docker registry. But the example of the benefit of having Artifactory in this place is because Artifactory also supports everything else. So you're not fully locked down to just Docker, right? You can still leverage everything else besides Docker. And on top of that, Artifactory supports fully highly available architecture. So you have your Docker registry, but now it's in HA mode. You're fully highly available. And then all these bells and whistles that comes along with it, that is the powerful security model that we talked about earlier, having access tokens and deploying security in many flexible ways, right? You can be really locked down infrastructure, or you can be really open infrastructure. Artifactory will support both of them. And It supports all the major CI/CD pipeline tools. Any platform, any tools that you have into your continuous integration or development platform, Artifactory will support that. So what it takes to make Artifactory highly available? This is the very common question that I get. How do I make my Artifactory HA? Right. So Artifactory has three components. One is the file store, one is the database, and the third is Artifactory application itself. You have these three applications or these three pieces, and you make your Artifactory fully HA. Let me get to a diagram and show you how Artifactory does the highly available configuration. Any communication coming to the Artifactory HA cluster goes through load balancer. So your load balancer sits in the front, and then behind load balancer you have your multiple Artifactory instances that are inside that HA cluster, right? Now those Artifactory instances will have common database. They all will share one database, and they all will share one file store. In the diagram I have NFS storage, but it could be any kind of storage. It could be local storage, network attached storage, S3 object storage, or any other kind of object storage as long as they're using S3 APIs, or direct attached storage. Any kind of storage will work with Artifactory. The idea is to share the storage among different Artifactory nodes so that they are in an HA cluster. So this is what makes Artifactory HA. Of course, you need to have Artifactory enterprise licenses across these three instances, but this is how you make your cluster highly available. I want to show you a quick demo onto how HA would work, or what it takes to have Artifactory HA. Let me switch to my terminal and show you how it works. Okay. So here I have my Artifactory instance, and this is sitting behind a load balancer. So if I go to my admins tab, and I'll show you that this cluster is an HA cluster. Okay, so as you can see here, I have two Artifactory instances running, and this Artifactory is part of the HA cluster. Now those two instances are here, 1 and 2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut down one instance while running a Maven job, so that you'll see that it's still going on. It's not going to crash, or it's not going to lock down on me. Even though one instance is down, it's still going to get information from the second instance. Okay. So I go to set me up, and I set up my Maven client. Okay, and I think I already have my settings.xml. Let's take a look. So as you can see here on my Maven client, I have my Artifactory instances set up. So this is going to Artifactory for my remote repositories. My libs release are going to libs release repositories. Same thing goes for lib snapshot and plugins release and so on. So as you can see, I have my Artifactory configured to talk to my Maven client. Now let's take a look at the Maven build that I have. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the cache from here, so that repository two. Okay. while I'm running this, I'm going to shut down this Artifactory instance. So okay, and now I'm going to factory.sh stop. Okay, now this is stopped, but if I take a look at my instance here and I refresh this, so you can see it will tell me my primary node is down, but my HA cluster is still up and running. If I go to my admin tab, go to high availability, you can see one instance is stopped, the second is still running. So I can still do my day-to-day job with Artifactory without having to worry about what's going on or anything on my client environment, right? But I still have a lot of time to triage what went wrong, what happened to my primary instance. And this is all admin team, right? Your client, your developer, your build infrastructure can still do their normal day-to-day activities. So let's take an example. I can still deploy an artifact. For example, let's select one file, and I'm gonna deploy commons.io to my generic repository here. And no, this has to be in the Maven repository. My bad, sorry. Okay. I think I have repository not configured for generic jar files, but you get the idea. This is going to be as smooth as it is. You don't have to worry about what went wrong. And while I'm working behind the scene to make sure this instance is up and running, again, your users won't see any issues on their side. Now let's start this instance again. And okay. So now it will come back up. Let's take a look at the slide deck now. Okay. So as you can see, how even if your instance goes down, your Artifactory would be still up and running. You don't have to worry about your pipeline going down or anything. Now, in my example, I only had 2 Artifactory nodes, but in an normal enterprise environment, you'll have at least 3 Artifactory nodes inside the cluster, so that your cluster can take loads even if or manage load or performance even if one of the nodes goes down. So this is how Artifactory HA can help you in terms of making sure your pipeline is reliable, your infrastructure is reliable, right? Moving on to the second challenge that we had was the scalable storage. Now, you have your Artifactory instance, you are generating binaries, you are generating your Docker images, your microservices builds are being continuously built, your artifacts and binaries are constantly deployed onto Artifactory. How do you make sure your storage is fully supportable or is fully scalable? And a lot of times you have your storage plugged into your local storage or the network attached storage. This is good, but it's not fully scalable, right? I mean, even if you want to scale a NAS, you have to take it off, enlarge it, and then attach it back again, right? But a lot of companies are today moving towards S3 object storage, for example, or any object storage that is using S3 API or S3 adapter behind the scene. So Artifactory is fully compatible with this kind of storage. So any object storage that you want to use, Artifactory would be able to support that. And in order to do that, what Artifactory does is Artifactory would be able to talk to S3 bucket directly from your HA environment. Now, until Artifactory 4.x, if you are a user who has been using HA environment for 4.x, then you know that Artifactory had a requirement of NFS layer if you are using object storage, right? But with Artifactory 5.0, we have eliminated that requirement. So now Artifactory is a fully cloud native application. You can talk to object storage directly without having to have NFS configured to talk to your S3 object storage, right? So you don't need the write cache anymore. I mean, of course, it will support NFS if you want to use NFS, but it's not mandatory anymore. The other questions I got a lot of time from customers was I cannot use S3. How can I still make sure that I have full flexibility in terms of storage expansion? To be honest, not everyone or not every organization has liberty of using S3 object storage, right? For example, financial institutions, they still are using local storage or network attached storage, and they don't have flexibility of using or leveraging their object storage data. For example, they cannot dump their data into Amazon S3 object store or anything that is outside of their environment, right? So to tackle this, Artifactory introduces sharding. Sharding is a special binary provider. What it does is Artifactory would be able to take multiple mounts of your data storage and dump the Artifactory artifacts into those mounts. So earlier, Artifactory was only able to take one NFS mount, right? But now it can take multiple mounts. It doesn't have to be NFS. It could be any kind of storage mount, physical mount. And along with this flexibility of expansion, what Artifactory sharding provides is it also provides you with redundancy as well. So let's take an example where you have, for example, 5 different mounts. And then you also want to make sure that your artifacts are being deployed or are replicated twice. So you have 2 copies of any single artifact to make sure your Artifactory storage is fully fault tolerant. Your Artifactory artifacts are redundant, right, to any kind of failures. So this way, Artifactory sharding would be able to help you in terms of making sure your storage is reliable, but it's also redundant to all those failures. And at the same time, it's scalable as well. So let me show you how it does that. So we have your JFrog Artifactory instance here. And in my example, I'm having 3 Artifactory shard mounts, right? So you have your sharded file store with 3 different mounts. Sharding will use 2 variables, mounts and redundancy. So M and R. In our case, mounts equal to 3 and redundancy equals to 2. Now let me explain you the concept of redundancy. The number that you set here for redundancy is the actual number of times Artifactory is going to store the copy of the artifact. In our case, I have redundancy set equal to 2. So this means that Artifactory is going to store 2 copies of every single artifact. If I had redundancy equal to 1, then Artifactory will store 1 copy. If I had redundancy equal to 3, then Artifactory is going to be storing 3 copies. So this means that you have full redundancy. Full redundancy is something where your redundancy count is equal to your mounts count, right? And of course, it's obvious that your redundancy cannot exceed your mounts. You cannot have 3 mounts and 4 redundancy. This is pretty obvious. So how it works is, if I have redundancy 2 and my mounts are 3, what Artifactory does is Artifactory will randomly deploy artifacts onto 2 different mounts. And this randomness is also pre-decided. You will decide if you want to have actual random deployment or you want to deploy based on the available storage on these mounts, or you want to deploy in a round robin fashion, right? So our file store configuration actually would be able to help you in terms of guide you through those configurations. Now, let's take an example of 3 objects or 3 artifacts: square, a circle, and a triangle. First artifact coming in is square. You are deploying square onto Artifactory. Now, in my example, I have mounts equal to 3, redundancy count is 2. So Artifactory is going to randomly deploy square onto 2 mounts. In our case, deployed onto mount 1 and mount 2. The second object coming in is a circle. Artifactory is going to choose randomly 2 different locations for deploying circle. In our case, mount 1 and mount 3. Third object coming in is a triangle. Same thing, it randomly deployed onto mount 2 and mount 3. So here you know that you have 2 copies of every single artifact that is coming in. A lot of our customers are also doing full redundancy. So they have 3 mounts, and full redundancy means it's going to store 3 copies of those artifacts inside these particular mounts. So this is the basic example, right? Now, this is the most simplest example that I can come up with, but the complexity is really flexible. We have customers doing really, really cool stuff with sharding, where they are having 5 different mounts Out of those 5 mounts, they have 2 applications who are using local storage, and that local storage is shared among different Artifactory instances. So they're doing mix and match of those mounts, and making sure that one request is coming from the same server, but it also can serve from different server in case that server is not available, right? So combination is endless. Like, you can do a lot of cool stuff with new binary store.xml that we came up with. We have a lot of example for that binary store on our wiki, so feel free to poke around our wiki. Our wiki is wiki.jfrog.com to find really cool examples on this, and we are also adding more and more examples to give you an idea of how powerful the binary store for sharding is. Let me show you a quick demo of how sharding works, and how if I deploy one artifact onto one instance, it's going to be available on the other one. Okay. Now, I don't think the first instance came up. Let's make sure that it's up and running so I can show you the sharding, how it works. Okay. All right. Let's refresh this. So as you can see, my primary instance is coming up. And once this is up, while this is up, let me show you my configuration for the binary store.xml. So this is my binary store.xml. As you can see here, I'm using my provider is sharding cluster. So I have 2 Artifactory nodes, and both of them are using local storage, right? And I have those local storage attached to my Artifactory shard so that they can act as the mounts for sharding, even though they are local on each of those instances. This is a really cool example of where you have Artifactory storage that is not scalable. You have multiple Artifactory instances that can share their local storage for the cluster itself, right? So you can have 3 instances, 5 instances sharing their local storage with each other. So I'm providing my binary store configuration here about the sharding cluster, and then I provide the information on the local storage that I have. So in my case, I have the mount created at /art data. And then the remote I have configured for other Artifactory instances that talk to this Artifactory instance, right? So you have the binary store.xml here. Now, since my Artifactory instance is up, let me show you the actual location where this is going to be stored. So art data /Artifactory, and then HA data. Here, as you can see, I have multiple directories for the first 2 letters of my checksum, right? So let's try and upload an artifact onto Artifactory, and we'll see that from one location, it's been uploaded to second location as well. So I'll go to my instance on the, okay, this is my second Artifactory instance attached to this cluster. I'll go to the same location, factory data. Okay, now this is my primary. This is this instance I was talking to load balancer, but now I'm talking directly to the primary instance here. As you can see, the IPs are different. 150.66, and this is, wait, no, oh yeah, it's still showing the load balancer IP, but I will be able to upload to one Artifactory instance and it will show up on the other one. So let's start uploading the artifacts. Okay, I will do the deploy. Select the file, and then let's upload commons IO 201. Okay. And if I go to this artifact, the checksum starts with 7FF, right? So I cd to 7F, and the checksum ends in 731A. Okay, so I have the artifact here, right? 731A. Let's take a look at the other instance. 7F, and I have the checksum that ends in 731A, the last one here, right? Let's upload one more example. Set the file, and let's upload an Artifactory JFrog logo. Okay. Now this is the image, for example. It's not a jar file, right? Now the checksum here starts with 28. Let's take a look. 28. And the checksum ends in 2AC. There you go. We have the 2AC checksum here. Similarly, let's take a look at here. 28, and checksum ends in 2AC. Right now, if I show you, the IP of these Artifactories are different. 10 to 40, 040, and the IP here is 10 to 40, 039, right? So these two are different IPs, and the directories that I have here, these are all local. As you can see, this is a local directory. H. As you see, this is local, and this is local as well. So even though I had local copies sharing, local storage sharing onto different Artifactory instances, as you see, the fully redundant artifact or fully redundant artifact sharding configuration will store artifacts into different locations at the same time. So the deployment is really quick. Now, this was the basic example of showing the sharding onto same data center, but you can have this kind of configuration onto multiple data centers, and your sharding is going to work really, really fine. Okay, let's get back to your presentation. So the next step is security, and this pertains to the user access and how do you access Artifactories with different users onto different instances and how it will work. With Artifactory 5.0, we are introducing access tokens. So what this access token is going to do is that it will basically allow you to authenticate a user onto different instances. So cross-instance authentication or cross-cluster authentication is also going to work fine. And these access tokens can be used for flexible scoping, or can also be controlled based on time. You can basically revoke a token after a certain set of time period, or you can refresh the token as a user. So it's basically up to you in terms of how you want to define or how you want to configure these tokens. But the primary idea is to have user allow access to multiple Artifactory instances across the globe without having to have local identity on those different Artifactory instances. So as you can see here, I have one user that's talking to cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C with one identity. So that way you can make sure that you have your one user have account on the multiple Artifactory instances without having a local copy of that user 3 different times. So you can authenticate in one instance. You can also allow authentication onto 2 instances and not the third one. If it's a master instance or production instance, you want to make sure that you are restricting access to those instances. But this is how access token would work. And this is also based on user and non-user authentication as well. So for example, I mean, the Artifactory user authentication is clear, right? Any user that is on Artifactory would be able to access it. But what about non-users? What about your cleanup users or your Jenkins user, for example? So with the help of access token, you can provide access to those users just for their task. So for example, CI server will have only access to the CI related jobs, build info, publishing, and grabbing dependencies, right? So the idea is to have access tokens for users and non-users to have access onto your Artifactory instances that are part of your circle of trust. So you don't have, your admins are not creating users manually onto multiple instances, or they are not having a headache of to managing multiple users onto multiple instances. So this is the whole idea of access token, and we are working on more use cases for access tokens. So we'll have more and more exciting announcements coming soon for access tokens. Right. The last challenge that we talked about was the monitoring aspect and the management of your Artifactory instances. How do you make sure that you are not spending unrequired amount of time onto managing Artifactory, or you are not doing any manual effort in terms of managing multiple Artifactory instances from different locations. And this is where we introduce Mission Control. Mission Control is basically our admin tool for managing multiple Artifactory instances from one location, right? And this is a stateless application, so it doesn't require a beefy system or something. Our developers are deploying Mission Control onto their local laptops or local desktops and managing multiple Artifactory instances through Mission Control. The idea is to have you give access to all the admin tasks that you do manually on Mission Control on Artifactory through Mission Control, right? So managing users, access permissions, repository configurations, DR configurations, replications, anything that you do as an admin can be done through Mission Control, right? So that is the major advantage of having Mission Control into an environment where you have, for example, let's say 5 or 6 different Artifactory instances across the globe. What you can do is any change that you want to trigger onto these applications, what you can do is you can configure that change onto Mission Control, and Mission Control will be able to push that change onto multiple Artifactory instances in a single push, right? Apart from this, it can also stand up your DR site ground up. All you need to do is let Mission Control know this is my master, this is my target, and then the rest of everything is taken care by Mission Control. Your config descriptor replication, your security descriptor replication, your actual Artifactory configuration, your database replication, your file store replication, your repository replication, everything is pushed onto your DR side, so that your DR is always up to the speed with your master, and then you can cut over to DR any point of time that you want, right? And to discuss more about Mission Control, we have a webinar coming up dedicated for Mission Control next week. So next Tuesday, feel free to chime in on that webinar and take a look for yourself what benefits or what features that Mission Control can provide you along with Artifactory. Okay. Last topic I want to discuss is we have our SwampUp conference coming up in May. This is our annual user conference that takes place in Napa in May every year. So we are taking papers, and we are taking any call for speakers right now. So feel free to sign up. Any sponsorships, any users tickets that you want to get for SwampUp, this is the right time. There is a sale going on right now, early bird sale. So feel free to take a look at our SwampUp page. It's a swampup.jfrog.com. We have really cool speakers coming up. We have a lot of sponsorship going on, and we also have a full dedicated day for trainings. So it's not just for higher management or management to attend, but it's also for developers and for end users. We'll be conducting trainings throughout the day dedicated for our developers, and training tracks are also be found on our website. So take a look at what kind of trainings are available. We have, I think, 7 to 8 different tracks for the training. A couple are half day, a couple are full day trainings. So take a look. If something that is interesting to you, you can sign up for the trainings and the conference itself. Okay, I think that concludes our webinar today. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them at me and I'll take a look at the question. I think I do have a couple minutes to take a look at the questions. I'll answer a few questions, and then if I'm not able to answer a few questions because of the time, feel free to email me, and then I'll be able to respond to those questions via email. Or you can just put your questions into the Q&A with your email, and I'll get back to you through the email for those questions. Okay. Let's take a look at the Q&A tab. So the first question is where source code should be managed if Artifactory doesn't. Well, Artifactory is not a source code management system. It's a binary repository management, right? So Artifactory won't be able to manage your source. I mean, you can dump your source code onto Artifactory, but it's not going to fully be able to manage your source code, because Artifactory doesn't go inside the source code, and it doesn't have feature that source code management does, right? Like, for example, Perforce or Git, they are built for managing sources. Artifactory is not built for managing sources. So your version control and all those things, all those cool features that you want out of your sources won't be available on the Artifactory. So we don't recommend dumping source code onto Artifactory, just like we don't recommend dumping binaries onto source code management system. Like, these two are different systems, and they have different features and they have different potentials. So I would recommend dumping source code into an SCM and binaries into Artifactory. Second question is, how can I know if my cloud is compatible with S3, and how can I use my cloud for storage scalability if it's not S3 compatible? This is I actually need more information on this question. I'm not really clear. If you can send me an email, I would be more than happy to schedule a session with you, or we can take a look at this question offline. I would need more concrete information onto this question. The third question is, what does the set me up menu item do? So set me up, yeah, that's a really good question. Set me up actually would be able to set up your client for you, right? So let me quickly show you what set me up does. Give me 1 second here. Sure. So set me up is used for setting up your client with Artifactory, right? So let's take an example of Maven repository, really simple, right? Now, this set me up is going to help me generate my settings.xml for talking to Artifactory, grabbing artifacts from Artifactory, but also it will be able to give you your settings for pom.xml for your projects to deploy artifacts onto Artifactory. So let's select the repository here. So generating Maven settings, and you select your repositories, what you want, and then this is your settings.xml, right? And this is your pom.xml configuration for deploying artifacts on Artifactory. Similarly, set me up would be able to help you find configuration for any other package type. For example, npm. You select your repository, and this is these are the steps you need to do to configure Artifactory for your client. Similarly, let me give you an example of RPM, right? These are the steps you need to do to configure your client to talk to Artifactory RPM repository. And these are the steps for deployment and resolution, right? So basically, set me up is your go-to button for configuring your client. Any package type, Artifactory has steps, detailed steps onto what to do with those things, okay? I'll be able to take one more question, and then I'm out of time. After your demo, is it possible to quickly show us how to set up a generic repository and allow admins to place in any binaries where others can reference for that? Yeah, sure. So setting up a generic repository is just like setting up other repositories. So go to admin and select a local repository, select new, and then in the package type, you select generic, okay? And then you give your repository name, and then you save it, right? So there you have your generic repository. Now, because I didn't configure anything on this repository in terms of access, now this is open to everyone. But you can restrict the access to this repository through our permissions module. Due to lack of time, I won't be able to go onto detailed steps onto how to do this, but feel free to email me, or this kind of information is also found on our wiki. Wiki has detailed steps onto how to give permissions on the repository for individual user or group of users or everyone, right? So you can find those information on our wiki, or feel free to email me and I'll be able to answer those questions. Okay. My email is raghavb@jfrog.com. Feel free to email me and I'll be able to answer any question that you have. I'll put the email here. It's raghavb@jfrog.com. Okay. So looking forward to your questions, and I think this concludes our webinar today. Thank you so much for attending the webinar, and recording would be soon available on our YouTube channel. So I think it should be available tomorrow. So feel free to take a look at YouTube channel for webinar recording if you want to take a look at back and share the recording with your teammates. Okay. Thank you so much for attending the webinar. You all have a good day.